Hey, everybody. Welcome to the very first episode of the Infield Report. It's going to be a podcast hosted by me, Isaac, and my older brother, Tyler.
Howdy.
We both have been fans of NASCAR for a really long time. Tyler has been a fan a little bit longer than I have been, but we both want to just talk about it and, talk about it with anybody that's willing to listen. We want to try to cover all three series in this podcast. We want to try to make sure every series gets their own amount of time, especially since the Truck Series and Xfinity Series, you see a lot of those guys come up and you see the big names super early on in the series, and it's a lot of fun to follow their journey throughout. So that's, I guess, the biggest reason for following all three, but it also gives all three series a chance to shine in their own right, because a lot of people just follow the main Cup series, but we want to try to give a shout out to everybody else that's in the we'll call it the lower two series, but they're still just as fun to watch. So we want to give them equal opportunity as well. And who knows, you might end up finding a favorite driver super early on before they become popular in the Cup Series, and that's just what makes it interesting to me. But we both want to try to just have a conversation with anybody that's willing to listen. So that's our main point for doing this, but we just want to have fun with it. So anything you want to add, Tyler?
We'll throw in some history here and there. We're going to try to have fun, educate some people, and like Isaac said, anyone that's listening.
Yeah, we're by no means experts in anything, but we just want to try to explain things the best we can to our knowledge, and also kind of be open to any sort of outside feedback if anything is incorrect, or if there's some information that you guys may know that we don't, or things like that. Like I said, we're by no means experts in the field at all, but we just want to have fun with it, and we're going to try to use iRacing to kind of explain some things if we can. I know we're going to try to showcase the next track up on the schedule, but we'll try to do as good of a job as we can with it. Like we said, it's not going to be 100% factual, but we'll try to get things as accurate as we can. But if there's anything else that we get wrong or anything, feel free to give us some feedback, and we'll be happy to listen. So, but yeah. So
The one thing to know is we are recording these on a Tuesday, usually mid-afternoon. So we might get some. We might be talking about news that already has an answer to it that maybe comes out on Wednesdays. We don't know when this episode's going to come out or what day of the week, but we'll try to get it out on Wednesday or Thursday. But just keep in mind, if there's any news that comes out like Tuesday night or Wednesday morning, we won't know about it. So just keep in mind, these are on Tuesdays. We try to collect as much information as we can before doing this. That way, everyone's informed the best that we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, we want to try to be informative and as factual as we can. But again, there is that delay of production that does take a little bit of time. So the facts on Tuesday might be different from what ends up being reported on Thursday or whatever, or Wednesday or Thursday, whenever this does come out. But just keep that in mind. So one of the big things we're going to try to talk about, not necessarily as much, but I know Tyler is more knowledgeable in the history of NASCAR. And that's not just because he's been around a little bit longer than I have, but also he does enjoy the history a little bit more or know a little bit more of the history than I personally do. But that's something I'm trying to get myself into as well and try to learn more about the sport. And one of the really cool things about this year in particular is the Xfinity and Truck Series are going back to Rockingham, which they haven't been to in several years. I know the trucks were last there in 2013, and it's been a couple years longer for the Xfinity Series. But I actually got the opportunity to go to that the open test session, which was really cool. I know a lot of the drivers after the fact said that it was a lot of fun. They don't see a reason why the Cup Series can't come back. I know Obviously they're back at North Wilkesboro for the All-Star race, so that's another track that they brought back. But they're slowly bringing back Rockingham, and I really wonder how long it's going to take for the Cup Series to come back. I don't know if it's going to be a year or two, or if they might just jump into it next year, depending on how this year goes with the Cup or the Xfinity and the Truck Series. And it is on Easter weekend too, so it is on a weekend that the Cup Series doesn't run. So it'll be interesting to see how much that affects the viewership. But I am curious as to how long it is going to take, or if the Cup Series will even return to Rockingham.
It's possible. They did a lot of safety upgrades. I think it was repaved or resurfaced. I think the last time, at least iRacing scanned it, I think was 2014 or 15. So if we do ever, do a segment on it, later down the road, it'll be like the 2013, 2015 configuration. So it's going to look a little different than the stuff you've seen on TV or through YouTube or other medias. So just keep that in mind. So
yeah, absolutely. But it was a lot of fun to go to that session and watch a lot of guys run that have never run there. You had Matt Crafton, who was there in the trucks. Obviously he's been racing for the last 20 plus years in the truck series, so he's been there. You also had veteran guys like in the Xfinity series. You had Casey Kane making a return, which is going to be pretty fun to watch. He's raced there previously as well, but it's going to be interesting. But like I said, a lot of those guys were running faster lap times than what they ever ran before they left, which was pretty interesting. They actually ran faster times than what the Cup Series guys ran before they left. So, but then again, the Cup Series left over 20 years ago, but they're still running very quick lap times. But it'll be interesting to see that and see the return, and hopefully the fans love it, and hopefully the turnout is great, and the Cup Series sees it and says, "Hey, we got a reason to actually come back." So hopefully that's a good reason for them to come back. But then again, there's a lot of this nostalgia that's coming back as well with NASCAR, and they want to try to appeal to the core fan base, or a different set of the fan base that they've lost over the years, and they want to try to bring those people back in. And I really hope that going back to Rockingham with the Xfinity and Truck Series does bring the attention and the want and the need for bringing the Cup Series back.
yeah, even if the Cup Series doesn't go back to these tracks, like as points races anyway, it's like Bowman Gray, or there's talks of Hickory down the road, North Wilkesboro, Rockingham. Even if the Cup Series doesn't go to them, the lower series can also bring attention back to it, bring the revenue in, and maybe as a one-off, or I don't want to say a flash in the pan per se, but kind of like a nice pop in circumstance, kind of every other year. That way the Cup Series can go there and showcase the history, the legendary status that it had, before this cookie cutter sensation was from '99 all the way till now. It's kind of getting boring with those tracks, so it'd be really nice to see these short tracks and heritage tracks that NASCAR has run on for years, and they slowly gotten away from.
Yeah, and it was really cool. I actually also got the opportunity to go to Bowman Gray as well, which was really fun. Like I said, they haven't raced there in, what was it, 54 years, I think it was. And going back to these sorts of tracks definitely, like I said earlier, brings a different set of the fan base either in or back, which is really cool. There's a lot of people, like you said, that like the historical stuff. They like the not so cookie cutter tracks, and like Bowman Gray definitely showed that. And it was really cool to see these guys run, especially at a quarter mile, which we don't have a quarter mile track in the rotation. They built one for the last 3 years out in LA, and we saw how that worked out. New track every year, not very entertaining. You had some fireworks the first year because it was a brand new track, but then again, with a different surface, a different track, a different area, Bowman Gray being as historical as it is in the racing community in general, um, you know, that definitely brought in a lot of interest. It was sold out. I want to say they had, for the main race at least, they had 40, I want to say 44 states represented. They had 5 countries and 3 continents. So it was a lot of wide interest. They said I think it was a 60-40 split as far as 60% of the tickets sold were from the state of North Carolina, and then the other 40% were sold outside of the state of North Carolina. But it was an electric atmosphere. I mean, it was a lot of fun to be a part of, and getting to experience a short track like that. I know we've been to a dirt short track, but that doesn't compare to the different sort of asphalt short track, you know, late model sort of stuff that exists, and that's a whole different circuit on its own out here. And it's a lot of fun to be a part of an atmosphere like that where there is beating and banging, and there's this different sort of energy, and you could tell a lot of the guys were having fun because, number one, it wasn't a points race, so it didn't count for much other than bragging rights. But you had some of the guys that have been there before. I think Chase Elliott and Bubba Wallace and guys like that that have run at that track, but in the late models. So it's a little bit different. But getting to run cup cars there, the dream is to run cup cars at the highest level. But then getting to run that at a track that you ran at when you were younger, but one that's got so much historical significance. I mean, that was pretty fun to see.
Oh yeah.
One of the other cool things was getting to see 2 of the Bowman Gray legends. You had Tim Brown and Burt Myers both getting their shot in a cup car. I know Tim Brown actually works with Rick Ware Racing, but 2 of them, I think they're the winningest drivers at the track in the track's history. Getting to run a cup car there was pretty fun to see. I know the night didn't end well for Burt Myers. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, Burt Myers got wrecked, unfortunately, and neither made the show. But getting to run in the duels, or the heat races, and the last chance qualifier was pretty fun. And, you know, obviously, if you're a fan of one in the area, you're not a fan of the other. But I was just rooting for both of them because they both are such legends at that track that just them getting to run in a cup car period was pretty fun to see. So I was rooting for both of them to make the show, but you know, I feel like just giving them a spot was going to be seen as wrong by some of the other drivers, but I wouldn't have cared. Like, they deserve it. They're legends at that track. Just give them a spot in the main. I don't care, but that's just me.
Then again, you have them race either in the same like heat race or whatever, the last chance. You know, I would have said, okay, between you two, whoever finishes ahead of the other gets to be in the show. The other one goes home.
Yeah, and that would have made fans of both happy, I think.
Yeah, and it was one of the very few times that both fan bases got together and rooted for each other. So
yeah, so I mean, that would have been fun to see either one, but just the fact that they both got a chance, I think, was really cool. So going from a preseason exhibition race at Bowman Gray at a really cool track to another legendary track in Daytona, we got to see throughout they had speed weeks throughout all of last week, and then we also had the start of the racing. We'll call it the Big Three series racing on Friday night, if we exclude the duels, which we'll get to later. But we had the Truck Series run on Friday night, which was pretty interesting. You had Corey Heim winning on a technicality because Parker Kligerman can never catch a break. The guy won at the Roval last year, technically, but then the win got taken away from him because of, I'll call it, questionable officiating and a questionable timing on a caution call. But we both have some opinions on how those should be officiated. Am I right, Tyler?
yeah, I think there should be like a painted white line off of turn 4, and or the last corner, and if they pass that, they have to throw the white flag or the white and yellow together. That's just me, but
Yeah, it's one of those tough things where I don't think they officiate it quite as consistently as they should, but that's a whole other topic that we can probably dive into on another day. But we had Corey Heim winning the race. Parker Kligerman did not pass post-race inspection. I believe the rear end of the truck was too low in post-race inspection. There was some speculation that the way that he was parked on the banking at the very end may have done it, but that team, Parker and Henderson Motorsports, they have appealed, and we're waiting on a ruling. No, there is no word on when that is, at least as of recording this. But if we have an update, we'll post an update in the next episode. But as of now, they're appealing. But Corey Heim gets the win for the first truck race of the year, and it was a pretty, I'll call it, I'll say lackluster race. There was no questionable calls or anything. It was just more of a kind of a decent race at best. You had Caden Honeycutt in the 45, Tony Breidinger and Clay Greenfield. They all spun coming off of turn 4 with no contact. There was some questions about downforce, and I think it was because they didn't have any practice, or they had minimal practice and qualifying because of weather over the weekend, so they didn't have a chance to kind of set things up the way that they wanted to, which I know did affect things. But that was fairly early. But then they ended up getting some things figured out, and I know Tony Breidinger, she had some damage on the left side of her truck that didn't seem to really affect her much. She had a great race up until the very end, or towards the end, when she got caught up in a late wreck. You had Tyler Ankrum, unfortunately, blowing an engine. He was having a great race as well. I know he was one of the top drivers last year, again in talks of being in the top again this year, but unfortunately blew an engine, and it was an unfortunate end. But things, unfortunately, at Daytona, they go the way they do. But we also had the big one on lap 82 towards the end. You had some strong contenders taken out in that one. Raja Karuth, another top driver. I feel like he's going to be in line for another win, at least one win this year. He's a strong talent that I want to see continue to do well. You had Tony Breidinger taken out in that one. Series veteran Matt Crafton taken out in that one. And Jack Wood, who was running really well in the 91 truck all night, unfortunately, he got taken out in that one as well. I was hoping that he was going to finish very well to keep that truck up towards the top, but unfortunately, things just didn't work out. And the big one strikes when you don't want it to. But that's the thing about these super speedway races, is you never know what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. ThorSport had a great showing for the weekend. Both their driver take number 4 or 5 at this point. ThorSport had a great showing for the weekend. 2 of their drivers, Ben Rhodes and Matt Crafton, won stages. Obviously, their first stage wins of the year, but Ben Rhodes won stage 1, Matt Crafton won stage 2. Unfortunately, they couldn't get another one of their drivers to win stage 3, but you had, like I said, a lot of interesting little stat nuggets, if you will, for the race. Norm Benning, at the age of 73, finished 16th. He's old enough to be many of these drivers' grandfathers, and yet he finished 16th, which is insane to me.
I think the age gap was, didn't they report 18 years old at 73?
Yeah, one of the younger drivers was, I believe, William Sawalich was one of the younger ones, and he just turned 18 last year. So That's the minimum age you can run on these super speedways is 18 for safety reasons. But yeah, you had 18-year-olds competing with Norm Benning, who's a casual young 73, and you had another veteran in Johnny Sauter. He's 46, I believe. He finished right behind Norm Benning in 17th. So uh, a lot of interesting little age-related nuggets there, but Norm Benning did pretty well. He kind of ran towards the middle of the pack, rear of the pack, but he kept his truck clean and finished top 16, which is a really good day for him. So I mean, I will say that was pretty good. You also had Frankie Muniz, Mr. Malcolm in the Middle himself, finishing top 10, which was good for him. I know he was very excited, especially to be taken seriously. I know there was a lot of this hype around him of, oh, he's just an actor driving, but he's actually got some serious skills. So I think it's just going to be a matter of time for him before they end up running really, really well consistently. But a great start for them nonetheless for the season. And I mean, I would like to see him continue to do well, not just be a face, but like actually a guy that shows that he can drive.
I never really watched Malcolm in the Middle growing up, but no, he's pretty well known around the TV world, and it was really nice to see him come back and want to do NASCAR seriously. I'm like, hey, good for him. I'll root for you.
Yeah, it's one of those feel good stories. I mean, I know he wanted to run more races last year, but obviously, unfortunately, on a vacation, got sick, and that took him out of a decent portion of his schedule. But he's back, and he's actually running full time this season, which is good to see. So hopefully, he can put together some consistent finishes. And I know the first two races of the year are super speedways for them, so it's going to be kind of a crapshoot either way. But once we get past the super speedway races, it'll be interesting to see what he can put together in a full-time season. And hopefully, like I said, I hope he does well, because I don't want to see this. Well, he's just a celebrity face, but actually somebody that is really good. So we'll see.
Unlike a certain Mr. Cletus McFarland, Mr. Zigged when he should have zagged. But it was kind of, I know we were not talking about the ARCA series too much because it's a short season and sometimes you can't see it on TV all the time. But nonetheless, it was kind of fun to see him. I didn't watch his live stream, but it sounds like that was probably they say the second highest viewing of an onboard camera in the past 2 years.
Yeah, which is good. It brings NASCAR eyeballs to the sport, Oh
yeah, and he listened to him on the rest of the broadcast for ARCO was fun.
Oh yeah, and it's a lot of fun to see eyeballs get put on this sport any way that you can. I mean, I know sometimes it's not always in a good way, but bringing eyeballs to the sport regardless is good. So, but yeah, it was I would like to see those new faces that come into the sport. I want to see them do well, whether they're a celebrity, whether they're a rookie, whether they're, coming from another series. I like to see them do well. Just like you had Connor Zilic coming in, kid's 18 but can drive anything. But William Sawalich, same thing. Well, he's a young kid, but still coming in and doing well. So good to see these guys running well. The younger guys and the rookies did pretty well for themselves, just in general. Gio Ruggiero, hopefully I'm saying his name right. He finished second in the 17 truck. He was doing really well. I enjoyed watching him. Didn't overthink it too much. There was a lot of maturity behind the helmet, which is good to see for a young guy. I know, again, it's the first race of the year, but seeing these guys, that the younger guys come in and they're more mature, they just don't wreck things, is good to see. I like to see guys that actually race smart and not just come in and bully their way through guys. But he did pretty well. And then Andres Perez, another younger driver coming from the ARCA series, he finished top 15 and 14th, which was good for him. He's got a lot of potential as well. He's not talked about as much with the rookie class this year, but he's definitely one that if you want to follow a driver that has a lot of potential. Andres Perez in the 77 truck is going to be a very, very good driver to watch this year. And again, we've got a lot of young drivers in the sport, whether it's in the Truck Series or the Xfinity Series. And the Xfinity Series saw a couple of young drivers having some big moments. You had Jesse Love winning the race, another young driver. That was his second career win. Good to see him get a win under his belt, another win under his belt. And he, at the end there, did a job holding the lines and just learning to race smart. I think he's probably one of the smartest young drivers out there right now, and it's fun to watch him control lines, or even if he's just bump drafting. I know in the Xfinity Series they can't hold the draft like they do in the Cup Series, but knowing when to push, knowing when and how to push properly is always important. And he didn't upset anybody too much, I don't think. But just the fact that he's as smart as he is mature. Again, the matureness in the sport will definitely help you. But yeah, it was a controversial finish at the line. Again, gotta love NASCAR and when they throw cautions, but you know, it's the way that they do things. It happened several times throughout the weekend, and the Xfinity Series proved to be no different. But you know, he got a win nonetheless. But yeah, it was a good race. But the most dominant car of the day was Austin Hill, and it was unfortunate the way he went out. He won both stages, which is always a good thing. But if I remember correctly, he's only won one race when he's swept both stages, and he's done it several times. So statistics were not on his side, but he had a really strong car. He was pacing the field. He was able to block the lines. He's always been a really good super speedway racer, but unfortunately, that rear end, whether it was axle grease or whatever, something broke in the rear end, and he was leaking fluids and couldn't get through that. Took him out late in the race, but he was a pretty strong car all day, but unfortunately couldn't get the job done, but led most of the laps, which was good for him. But one of the drivers that was not as mature early on was Brandon Jones. He early on lap five, had some issues. I know he had to check up to some drivers in front of him, but things stacked up behind Brandon Jones. You had a bunch of drivers taken out in that one. Daniel Dye, his first full-time season, moving up from the Truck Series into the number 10 colleague car. He got taken out in that one, which was very unfortunate. But the big one on lap 5 to me is a little early. I don't know about you. I think lap 5 is a little too early for a big wreck like that.
Yeah, but, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
That is correct. And unfortunately, the way that it happens, you just can't predict what happens at Daytona. It's one of those races where anything can happen at any given time. And so you just got to expect it. It's unfortunate. But unexpected doesn't even compare to what happened between Josh Bilicki and Chris Wright. That was probably one of the most bizarre incidents I've ever seen. You'll see this image right here. It says it all. Chris Wright, I don't know. He claims there was some miscommunication with his spotter coming down pit road or coming down to pit road or something. I don't know whether he locked up or lost brakes or what happened, but he just plows right into the back of Josh Bilicki. And that 91 car, it knocked the transponder out of it. And at one point, it was showing Josh Bilicki 4 laps down, but he was still on the lead lap. So they talked to NASCAR. NASCAR tried to get him a new transponder, but the team said the brackets were torn off. Like there was no place to put it. So they ended up mounting it somehow and getting it fixed. But Josh Bilicki was not very happy with this accident that happened, rightfully so. I know there was a lot of flack going towards Chris Wright, and the way that the interview went, he didn't seem to take a whole lot of responsibility for it, but the biggest thing that he said was there was miscommunication. If you know how to pit at Daytona, or if you've pitted at Daytona before, you should kind of sort of know when to brake, but he came in probably at 100. Like he was flying down towards pit road, but
I thought I heard somewhere, quite a few laps before at the last pit stop that there were some brake issues. So they were going to try to get different braking and reference points in the pits and coming to the pits. I don't know if that was a contributing factor or not, but that's what I was hearing, was some brake issues, and I don't know if they just gave way as he was braking, but yeah, he came in like bat out of hell,
Oh yeah,
plowing into everybody, and
it unfortunately did not end the day for Josh Bilicki, which was good. Obviously ended Chris Wright's night, but Josh Bilicki was lucky enough to be able to drive away from that and actually continue the race and finish. So, just one of the weirdest incidents I think I've ever seen in a race. Just, I don't know, like you said, whether it was brake issues, brake failure, what have you, but it was just one of the weirdest situations I think I've ever seen. Yeah, so it was a fairly interesting race throughout. Late, there was some questionable moves made by some drivers. You had a late wreck that unfortunately took out Connor Zilic, which is one of the big young drivers driving for Trackhouse right now, and he's making a name for himself in a good way. But unfortunately, what happened in the race on Saturday didn't help his case. He ended up crashing out with William Sawalich and Greg Van Alst, who won the ARCA race back in 2023. But unfortunately, like you said, like we said earlier, wrecks at super speedways are going to happen. You just don't know when or where. And that big one happened as Jesse Love took the white flag. Now, it was right before the start-finish line is when the flag flew, and it was as they were coming to the white. So it was, again, another questionable timing call for when they threw the caution, but they threw the caution. Jesse Love took the white. They gave him the win, and I'm going to transition over here to one of my favorite pictures from the weekend. The team put this picture out. It is one of the best time pictures I've seen in a long time of him. Just he's not old enough to drink, number one, but whatever he's drinking, I can't tell what that is. It just hits him square in the face, and it's perfectly timed. So it was magnificent. But if you're listening to this on any other platform, it's on YouTube, so you can find it. It was actually posted to the RCR social pages as well, so you should be able to find it. But if you're listening to this audio only, it's a great image. You'll have to go and look it up. We had some interesting and fun racing throughout the entirety of the week, not just over the course of Friday and Saturday night with the Truck and Xfinity series, but we also had the duels that were on Thursday night. We had qualifying was on Wednesday, right? It was on Wednesday. Yep. So we had qualifying Wednesday, but the interesting thing about Daytona qualifying is you have qualifying on Wednesday night, but that only determines the top two spots. So that'll be the front row. And then you also have only 40 cars are allowed to make it on speed. And then we had this weird open exemption provisional thing with Helio Castroneves. That was a whole other thing that guaranteed him a spot regardless. But on a normal year, you have 36 chartered entries, which are guaranteed a spot. Each charter is owned by a team, and it guarantees you an entry into every single race and a certain percentage of the payout every week. You are guaranteed points. You're eligible to race for the championship. You're eligible to race for the owners' championship, things like that. And then you also have these open entries, which are not guaranteed entry, and you have to qualify your way in based on speed. And that's what makes it fun watching those or the qualifying on Wednesday, is because you have a lot of guys that are racing to try to make it in on speed. And if they're in on speed, that guarantees them a spot, regardless of their their dual outcome, which is pretty fun. But then you also have guys that don't make it on speed, so then they have to race their way into the duel. They have to be the top open entry car in that duel to be locked in. We had a weird rule this year with Helio Castroneves. NASCAR introduced it, and it got a lot of backlash from some drivers, notably Jimmy Johnson and Martin Truex Jr., who felt that they should have been maybe notified of this. It's guaranteed a spot to a driver based on like merit and other outside achievements or something like that. It's a weird, convoluted thing, and it's very technical, and you have to apply for it in 90 days in advance, and NASCAR has to approve it, this and that, and it goes based on whatever NASCAR thinks is correct, who they think, if multiple drivers were to apply for it. But that's a whole other topic. But watching the qualifying, like I said, sets the top two rows. And then the duels on Thursday, those are the races that guarantee the other spots in, the other open entries. But then it also does set up your line as well for the inside and outside lanes for duels 1 and 2. So those are important. People think, oh, it's just another exhibition race, but it does set your lineup for where you line up in Sunday. So a lot of these drivers do end up trying, because you want every position gained in your duel is actually 2 positions gained where you start. So if you finish 4th versus 5th, that's a difference between 8th and 10th potentially, or 9th and 11th, depending on which duel you're in. So those are fun. Unfortunately, we had a lot of drivers that were involved in some accidents in the duels, and I want to say we had like 6 or 7 drivers go to a backup car for the main race, which does suck because these teams put a lot of effort into their primary cars, and some teams they only bring 2. I know Trackhouse brought 2 backup cars, but they had to use 3, or they had all 3 of their cars, or I'm sorry, all 4 of their cars, if you include Helio Castroneves, involved in accidents. So they had to pick and choose whose they repaired and whose they went to the backup car with, which does make it difficult because, a lot of these teams put a ton of effort in, especially for the one-offs like Helio Castroneves and Martin Truex Jr. and Jimmy Johnson. So it does suck if they do have to go to a backup car. So for the dual races, it was a lot of fun. You had Bubba Wallace winning the first one, and Austin Cindric won the second one. Yeah, so the Toyotas were fast, and it was just a matter of which Toyota driver was either going to win a duel, both duels. I knew they were going to finish high, but didn't know exactly what. But that brings us to the 500, the main event of the weekend. They actually moved it up. I believe it was an hour, or maybe it was a half hour. It wasn't too much, but they moved it up enough because they did anticipate rain. Unfortunately, so fortunately, they got all the pre-race activities in that they wanted to. They had the concert, they had the presidential visit, they had all of the pomp and circumstance that comes with the Daytona 500, because it is the biggest race of the year. They call it their Super Bowl, if you will. And it went pretty well. And then they ran 10 laps before rain. And then we sat there for 4 hours on a rain delay. But I have to give the booth credit. I have to give, the TV broadcast credit. They did a lot of, um, they did a really great job at making it through the rain delay without it being too boring. I know Carson Hocevar had himself a time because he hopped on iRacing. So somebody wanted to drive regardless, and he did. So it was fun to, if you wanted to hop on that stream, you could, and it was fun to watch. I watched a little clip of it, and he was having a bit of fun. Didn't just race at Daytona, but he loves to race, so he hopped on iRacing and just had a time. So, but then we went back racing about 4 hours later, and we were under the lights at Daytona. It was a lot of fun to watch. There was quite a bit of fuel save. We played the fuel save game because that's just what we do. It is what it is.
I understand why they're doing it, but come on, just push, dude.
Like I get it. There's the strategy of fuel save, but I want to say last year was probably the most boring first two stages I've ever seen at Daytona, because it was just, they were in this perpetual fuel save mode, and like they were going 70%, and I want to say they had like the slowest average speed at one point. But you just got to push. I don't care if it's the 500. I don't care. Like in the biggest race of the year, you have to make it entertaining. That's just me.
Yeah, I get it. It is to make sure your pit stops are short so you can jump. But at the same time, everyone's starting to slow down. I don't want it to turn into, what year was it in Formula One, where it was qualifying where no one wanted to be ahead because you would have the slowest time. I know qualifying and racing is different, but everyone was so slow. No, you go first. No, you go first. No, I'm going to lay back here. It's a race car. Supposed to go fast. Supposed to be speedy boy.
Exactly. You can't just go out there and we're just going to ride around, which I know there have been some drivers in the past who have said that they'll ride, quote unquote, ride around in the back. And, in that context, they'll quote unquote ride around so that way they miss out on a wreck that they anticipate happening. But
exactly, that's one thing, but it's I'm not going to get into the weird schematics of the 100% rule or whatever that was implemented, but come on, just 70% throttle, really? You're the leader. Push. Someone gets ahead of you. Okay, then you can kind of ride around.
It doesn't make it much fun to watch a car go 70%. Yes, they're still going 170, 180 miles an hour, but that's not... It doesn't make it entertaining because nobody wants to try to pass each other. You don't want to be out in front because you're burning the most gas, but you don't want to be pushing the guy with 100% because then you're going to be using more gas than he is. You're actually giving him the opportunity to save a little bit more. It's this ridiculous thing, but they ended up racing and it was a lot of fun. The picture of Justin Allgaier came up not too long ago, and that was an interesting open entry to watch for the entire week. Car owned by Dale Jr., his first ever, Junior Motorsports' first ever Daytona 500 attempt, their first entry, their first Cup Series entry just in general, and sponsored by Chris Stapleton's whiskey. I'm not going to say it for copyright reasons, but obviously you saw it. But it was really cool to see Dale Jr. as involved as he was all weekend. I know the morning of qualifying, I believe it was, he was there at 6 a.m.
Pretty much when the track opens, so he was ready.
Oh yeah, he was so ready to watch that car get itself on track. He was more involved than I've ever seen him with his Xfinity program, but that's only because I'm not trying to downplay it, but the Xfinity program on the day to day, he's had that program for 20 years. Like, it's understandable. It can kind of sort of the newness of it all can kind of sort of get stale, but having that cup entry with his sister and it being their first ever, cup entry at Daytona with all of the things that have happened at Daytona for that Earnhardt family, it was really, really cool to see. It was a lot of fun to watch um, Justin Allgaier try to make it in on the duels or for the duels, and try to make it in on speed, and then try to make it in as the open entry. And when he made it, I'm surprised that there were no, like, I don't think Dale Jr. would have bawled his eyes out, but I was expecting like crazy, crazy amounts of tears. But he said, whatever happens at this point after this point in the weekend, I don't care. We have a cup car in the Daytona 500 on Sunday. Like, that's all that matters.
It is a big deal.
Oh yeah, and not everybody can get their car into the Daytona 500. I mean, there were 42 entries, I think, this year, or 43. There were quite a bit of entries, and there's only 40 spots, so not everybody's going to get in. And so it was pretty fun to watch that entire storyline happen all weekend long, with Justin Allgaier being the veteran driver over there at Junior Motorsports and getting a shot. I know he's raced in the Cup Series before, but getting to show off his talent and getting to show off all the hard work of Junior Motorsports and their whole team, and getting their first ever Cup car into the 500, and then finishing with a top 10 at that. Not just a finish, but top 10 finish was really cool to see. Yeah, so the actual racing of the Daytona 500, like I said, going back to, if you take out the fuel saving portion of the race, it actually was a pretty interesting race. I know there was not a whole lot of action, but you did have a lot of, I want to say it was fairly early on, we had some three wide going on, which was a lot of fun. And it was fun to watch the three wide happen pretty early, although it did kind of stall out the middle lane and allow the dominant lane to be the bottom. But just getting to watch three wide at Daytona is always fun. And just, the overall feeling of NASCAR's back. Like, I know the off season isn't very long, but just the fact that NASCAR's back is such a good feeling, because all three series are back, four if you can include ARCA, and I have a wonderful feeling knowing that the Cup Series, or NASCAR in general, is back, and things are somewhat okay again. but no, so like I said, the 500 was fun. We had William Byron becoming a back-to-back winner, controversially so, if you want to call it that. But
here's my take on it. So we're always bantering about NASCAR's officiating practices. This is one of the few times that, yes, they should have thrown the yellow. If they were in like turns 3 and 4, already in the turn, as it was happening, okay, maybe racing to the line.
Yeah,
but they were pretty much 3/4 down the backstretch. They're all wrecking, and they never, ever, I don't think they ever threw the yellow.
I don't think they did. I think they just raced back to the line.
Which, I get it, they don't race back to the line because of safety and things of that nature, because you don't want someone coming around the corner at 109 mile an hour. There's someone stopped at 0 miles an hour right around the corner. I get it. That's fine. But this is one of the few times where, yes, the yellow should have been thrown.
Yeah, and I think they decided to do that, in my opinion, just looking from the outside in. My opinion is they saw what happened all weekend. They saw what happened with the truck race and the Xfinity race, and they went, well, everybody was kind of ticked off at the way how it ended. So this is kind of a similar situation, so let's let it run out. And it was, unfortunately, the wrong call, and you have to officiate those things and call those things consistently. I mean, consistency is one of those things that I don't think they've quite figured out yet. But they'll they'll learn from this one, and they'll go, okay, maybe we should have, and this is a note for future reference, and if something like this does happen again, we can learn from this. But the problem with NASCAR is no two situations are exactly the same. It's not like a an NFL incident where, well, this is pass interference, but this isn't. Like, that one's still questionable. That's a terrible reference, but like, you can't go, okay, well, this is a holding call, well, this is not. Like, you have to be there are rules in place in those sorts of leagues where things are a little bit easier to compare because they're a little bit more similar.
Yeah, they're more black and white. They're more cut and dry. They're more blatant.
Yeah,
but
and
with racing, there is a way to make it like black and white, cut and dry. But you have to have like a really good and consistent team, or a third party team that goes in and goes, okay, throw it here, do this, do that. And I think they need to be not reliant on these TV screens, which is kind of a big. Dale Jr. kind of expressed his opinions on that. You need to be looking at the TV. That's what the viewer is seeing. It's like, no, look out there. You can see things. You can see different battles. You can see this. You can see a car wrecking over here. If you're just looking at the screen, you don't see the car wreck.
Yep.
Going back to the Parker Kligerman Charlotte Roval thing. You saw it on TV. Oh no, he's in the fence. Throw the yellow.
Well, the problem is NASCAR, for the Roval thing, NASCAR did not see it for whatever, I want to say it was 15 seconds they waited, but they showed it on TV.
Yeah, and they say, oh yeah, we are looking at the TV, we have all this stuff, and 20 seconds to see it? 20 seconds to see it? That's a third of a lap. Roughly.
Yeah. I mean, not to say NASCAR officiating is garbage, because it's not. There are a lot of moments that they do get right, but unfortunately, it's just like every other sports league. It's just like every other officiating decision from those leagues. You don't get credit when you get it right, but you get a lot of flack and a lot of attention when you get it wrong. And or if it's questionable, or if it's close, or if you don't, like, obviously the questionable and close ones, you're never going to please 100% of people. And even if it is cut and dry, like, these are the rules, this is not the rule, you're still not going to make everybody happy. But at least with those, if it's the correct call, and maybe they need to go and look and change the rule or modify the rule for next year, maybe. But they never get the credit for the calls that they get right. And they do get a lot of them right. So I don't want this to seem like we're bashing on the officials, but like, they've got to be a little bit more consistent. And I know they do try, but there's just got to be some improvement somewhere. But I will say, as far as improvement goes, one thing we can definitely say has improved over the last 20, 30, 40 years is safety. And I mean, that the most unfortunate driver, I think, at Daytona right now is Ryan Preece. And this guy cannot catch a break either. I mean, he flipped at Daytona 2 years ago during the summer race, and they ended up having to, or they made the decision to pave the grass at Daytona on the backstretch because they thought it would, lessen the chance of the car flipping, which it did. But then you also have incidents like this where it's another one-off, weird, insane, bizarre. Ryan Preece pops a wheelie.
Pretty much.
When do you see a stock car that's 3,500 pounds pop a wheelie like this? I mean, the image just popped up and it's like, it's insane to look at because you think it's photoshopped. And I mean, yes, he does hit the front right of Eric Jones of the 43, but I mean, yes, he pops a wheelie, but usually those sorts of things don't result in the car going that much in the air. But then again, it's physics. You're going 190 plus. I don't want to blame the underbody, but like it's a fairly flat underbody. You know, physics are going to tell you you go so fast, you get so much air underneath it. No matter what you do, no matter how many roof rails you put on it, a mohawk, whatever you do with it, that thing is still going to end up going up.
Yeah, people are saying, get rid of the underbody and whatnot, and I'm in that crowd. However, I think the two glaring culprits, I guess you can say, was take Corey LaJoie in, what was it, Michigan last year?
Was it Michigan or was it Talladega? It was Michigan because it was Michigan, yeah.
It was Michigan. So how windy was it? It was what, 30 mile an hour gusts, 20, 30?
Yeah.
They're already going 180 mile an hour. So you get sideways, that's already 200.
Exactly.
And the winds at Daytona were not that much, but they were 20 miles an hour. And he flipped at, what, 130? 140 miles an hour? I can't remember.
It was somewhere in that range, I believe.
So he's still going 170 miles an hour. And a wind gust can bump that up 5-10 miles an hour. So that's up to 180. So it's almost like he's accelerating sometimes when the wind gusts like that. So I do believe that wind played a part of it. But yes, this underbody is creating an airplane wing like it's supposed to, but you get just a little air under it, and it's an airplane wing for the wrong reasons. If you look closely at it, I don't know if you have a picture of it or if you can find one, or even a small GIF of it. If you look closely, you know how when the hood kind of bowls up a little bit, like with all that negative air, kind of almost turns into kind of like a bubble, or it looks like inflated. That's what the underbody did. When he flipped over, it just started turning into a balloon.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate.
But I do think that wind played a huge factor in that, and it was coincidental with what Corey LaJoie did, what happened to him in Michigan. I don't know if the wind played a factor in Josh Berry's flip last year.
Yeah, that one did happen too.
Yeah, that was more of a, I get it. You can't get rid of flips in motor racing. The cars are going to flip either at 5 miles an hour. Take Kyle Busch, for example, July 2014, I think. Daytona, he flipped at like 10 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And they're going to flip either at 5 miles an hour or 195 miles an hour. Different set of circumstances. Yes, there's what's called blowovers with extreme speeds, but they're going to flip, they're going to catch grass. You can't get rid of that 100%. I get that. But getting rid of the underbody is most likely going to be the best. No, it's not the diffuser. It's attached to the underbody, but it is not the diffuser 100% on its own. I don't know how that rumor started. I don't know if NASCAR believes that's what it is, or if that's what they're talking about. But it's not the diffuser. Something needs to be done about the underbody, or put cuts into it, something. That way when it does get up in the air like that, it doesn't do a backflip.
Yeah, and I'm noticing too, I don't know if the roof flaps and the hood flaps are supposed to deploy when it's up at an angle like that, but from what I'm seeing, there are no flaps that deployed, period.
It's the way he was, because the car's not, so the roof flaps are not designed to open. I think Kevin Harvick said it best. The roof flaps are not designed to deploy when the car's doing a wheelie. They're supposed to deploy when the car's sideways and negative pressure goes across them. I think it's
Right.
now. I think it's electronic sensors that do it now. Don't quote me on that, but I can look into that for maybe next episode or later down the line when it's relevant. But they
They're
deploy when it's at a certain angle and the negative pressure, air gets into it, and they open. That's what they're
yeah,
designed to do. That's what the ones on the hoods are for as well. But it
yeah,
goes up in the air, and it goes up in the air quicker than anything can deploy. And he's just a kite in the wind, literally.
yeah. And looking at these pictures of the aftermath too, I mean, it's a credit to the innovation in safety and things like that. Like remembering the Priest crash from 2 years ago, I mean, he flipped 12, 13 times in the air, which was ridiculous, tore the car apart, but he was, I mean, minus bloodshot eyes, he was pretty much okay. And, there is the in car of him for this one. And then even in his interview, you can see him brace for when he flips. And, it's very unfortunate that it's been the same guy twice in the last 3 years, but
He's the Ryan
you know,
Newman of this generation. Rocket Man for different
unfortunately,
reasons. Rocket Man for different reasons, but I digress.
unfortunately, but it is a testament to the safety of the car, and you see how torn up it is. But the fact that he's okay, I mean, it blows
We
my mind.
we do have to give this new car credit though, and
Yeah.
all the safety that has gone on since 2002. We do have to
Oh yeah.
give NASCAR and the cars credit.
Oh yeah. A ton of credit, because if this wreck would have happened 20 years ago, put it 25 years ago now, things would have been much, much different. And I'm so glad that he's okay. I'm glad that nothing catastrophic happened. The car is okay. I mean, it was pretty scary when he said in his post race interview, all I could think about when he went over was his daughter. Like that made a lot of people on social media nauseous. I saw they were like, can't even imagine what he was thinking about in that moment. But knowing that he's okay, he's able to race. The car is destroyed, but the car is irrelevant at this point. Well, I mean, it's relevant to the fact of safety, but like the fact that,
But it still has its flaws of, lack of a better term, aerodynamices. It's
yeah,
just
you can make it efficient for speed, but then once it gets going the other way or upside down or up in the air in any way, good luck with it. But it is
I
good to see
don't
that he's okay.
I don't think anybody's talking about it enough. But Ryan Priest also said something pretty profound that I think needs a bigger light. He said, all I could think about was my daughter, and we're getting closer to the point where someone won't. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, yeah, these cars are safe, but at the same time, one wrong flip or one little bounce, and he could have gone over the fence, worst case scenario, or through the fence, or be the opposite of what Austin Dillon was in 2015, I think, 2014, 2015, where you hit the fence flat, either at the floor or the roof. And I
Yeah.
don't think we need another Dan Weldon tragedy
We don't.
of someone going through the fence and that's that. So,
Right.
yes, these cars are safe, but it just takes one freak accident. And we don't need someone to be on the front page news for the wrong reasons.
Right. And like you said, give him credit. I mean, yes, Ryan Priest was sort of on front page news, but for good reasons. But we just need to make sure that they're for good reasons and not for bad reasons. And I know that this car is probably back in Charlotte right now. I would imagine at the R&D center right now being looked at. And, NASCAR's going to look at it and, do a bunch of investigating and give out all, or, release the information to the teams, and with all the safety that was done and can be done, maybe possibly, I don't know, but it's good to see that the safety is improved on it. One of the things that I want this to be known for, this podcast to be known for, is we want to try to use iRacing to highlight some things about the upcoming track or the, something in the previous week's track or something like that, just to kind of give you guys a feeling of what it might be like for the weekend. It's obviously not going to be 110% accurate because it's simulation, but with Tyler driving it, at least there's some form of, you get what it looks like from a driver's perspective to race at one of these tracks and sort of see the little nuances of each track, because everything is different. And I know you were at Atlanta. How many years ago was that now?
I believe I went in 2002 and 2003. I do believe they were both the spring races. If I remember, not trying to show off my memory here, I think Tony Stewart won the one in March, and then the very next year Dale Jr. won it, I believe. We were
Fact check us in the comments if that's incorrect, but I trust him? Question mark.
I trust me, yeah, sure.
But yeah, so this track definitely looks different. They reconfigured it in
2022, I think.
21 or 22, I can't remember. It was one of those 2 years.
Kurt Busch won the last one at the old. It was 2021.
Yeah, so
because it was part of the new car as well. Because this generation of car never raced at that.
That's right.
At that configuration.
That's right. So they wanted to change this to a high-speed super speedway style. So if you've ever been to the old track before 2021, 2022, this is not the track that you would have seen. This is different, higher speed. Like I said, there's the first couple races were kind of iffy because it was a brand new pavement, it was brand new surface, but it's worn in, and I think the drivers like it a lot better now. But we had the closest 3-wide finish in NASCAR history that happened last season between Daniel Suarez, Ryan Blaney, and Kyle Busch. If you do feel ever so inclined to Google that, or if you have seen it or look it up on the internet, it made its rounds last year for sure. And it definitely is a much more entertaining track now that it's aged. And there are some different nuances as well that make this different from most other tracks. Like you'll see here, it's much deeper than what you would imagine. A lot of the 1.5 miles are not this crazy steep, but then it's also got this double dog leg design to make it look like a elongated D, if you will. And
its technical configuration is a D-shaped oval. So is Charlotte. So is Texas. And on a technicality, the old Atlanta was called a D-shaped. Yep. I don't know if Dover is considered that, because I think the straightaways are not long enough.
They are not, but
I will fact check myself, when we're done recording. But
yeah, so this definitely races a whole lot different than those other 1.5 miles that you'll normally run. Those are intermediate. Those are more flat. They're more wide open. Like they're much wider. As far as you can run 3 or 4 lanes in the corner. This one, not so much. You can run 3 lanes, but it's tight. It is very tight.
It's more like it's more like 2 3/4 lanes.
Yeah, they've run 3 wide before, but it doesn't hold for long. But it's very, very different. It's like we've said, it's a super speedway style, drafting, high speed. It's a lot of fun to watch, especially now. Like I said, that the track is aged quite a bit. I know 3 years might not seem like a lot, but trust me, with asphalt and different surfaces, you'll notice a difference year over year for sure. But you'll still see that, in this in-car, you'll still see it's still fairly rough. There's a lot of the bumps. They kept a lot of the characteristics from what the surface used to be. So they didn't just go and repave it and smooth it out. They kept some of the character to the track, which is nice to see as well.
It was kind of a shock because I think you and I loved racing NASCAR '09 on the 360.
Mm-hmm.
And after a while, it became a very fun track. It almost drove it like Daytona. Threw it in there, you
Almost.
lifted a little bit, braked a tiny bit, and got the car sideways, and it was
Mm-hmm. It
great. Even though
was a lot of fun.
the car tomorrow kind of sucked aerodynamically.
Oh, it was
But
terrible.
and EA, that was something totally different. But yeah,
Yeah,
this
but
is, yeah, it can be boring just kind of running around the bottom and trying to get quick laps and things like that, especially Daytona and Talladega. They might be boring, but you can kind of see what they're seeing, and
yeah, and I mean you can see there's, like I said, there's a lot of different. Depending on where you run in the corner, it's going to run differently too. The higher up you run, it's going to be a little bit different than if you run on the bottom. There's, one of the interesting things is as well is I want to say they said Atlanta. I don't think is as much of a tire strategy race as much because I don't think it wears out quite as much, or maybe it does. I don't remember.
the pavement or the surface is still new, so tires aren't that big of an issue. But
Could be wrong. Next week could be, or this upcoming week could be, you know, something completely different. I know they do a lot of different. One of the things with NASCAR is they will bring different tires to the track year over year, but it's all dependent on whether they're trying out a new compound or whether they're trying out something new for an upcoming race or whatever. But I believe this is going to be the same tire as what it was last year, but I could be 100% wrong.
bring the
But
Bristol from spring. Bring those
geez,
tires.
have them pit every 10 laps.
Every 3 laps, probably.
Actually, it probably would be 3 laps because just tire fall off would be incredibly crazy. But the other interesting thing about this track as well is the way that you come into pit road. Normally, it'll be on the exit of 4, or if it's like a super short track, it'll be, you'll have it down the back stretch, the entrance coming off at 2 or something like that. But most of them are coming off at turn 4. But
It'll
this
be like
one,
this. Most
yeah,
tracks
you'll come in off of 4, slow it way down, and then you'll have an entrance. You saw it like at Daytona last week if you watched. You come off of 4, and it was wide open. You had a lot of room, but you come in and you pit, just off of 4. Well, Atlanta's not that way. They decided to do something different with this track, with it being the super high speedway race. They decided to change things up a little bit. So instead of exiting off at turn 4, you now have to come down the backstretch, and your entrance to pit road is on the start of turn 3. But your speed limit is 90 miles an hour. And then once you get around 3 and 4 and then come onto pit road, there's a different section and your speed limit changes again back down to what your quote unquote normal pit road speed would be, which is 45 miles an hour. So Tyler's going to do another lap here, just regular lap, and then he's going to come around and show you. It's actually pretty difficult to get onto this new style of pit road. We saw some issues last year with Michael McDowell, William Byron getting into each other, trying to slow down for the entrance of turn 3 to pit road. It's a little different. I didn't quite care much for it, but
hand out the window.
And right here, that's where once you see the first line, that's your first entrance to pit road. Speed limit is 90. And then once you get around and through 4, where you're old pit road would be, which would be right here where the cone is, it drops to 45.
It's not too
So,
terrible. It's just, you're going to have a whole bunch of Kyle Larsons behind you trying to be bad out of hell, trying to get there first.
yeah. So
And
it's going to be interesting.
it's a matter of, whoops. I'm talking and driving at the same time. That's not good. Better than drinking and driving.
Absolutely. But it's going to be interesting.
Yeah,
for
it's just a
sure.
matter of, I'll do it one more time, yeah, you can, you'll try to do it last minute and see how I don't know if you can see in the bottom left, but I was doing 76 miles an hour.
Mhm.
And there's going to be people that are going to overshoot that by 20, 30 miles an hour. And you're going to be pretty much toast.
And that's what happened with William Byron last year was he was coming in really hot and then he ended up locking up his brakes and spinning. And so it's going to be one of those aspects to watch this week is speeding penalties and just watching when they are calling for those pit windows or when they say the pit window is open, you're going to want to make sure you watch out because you could end up having some speeding penalties. They track you throughout the entire corner. So, and I believe it's time over distance. So you could end up the closer you are to the grass or the inside, you'll end up technically sort of speeding. But one of those things where you're just going to have to double check and really the drivers are really going to be paying attention for that. And those speeding penalties are going to happen. It's not a matter of if, but it's who.
And how many?
And yeah, how many is the big question. So one thing to keep your eyes peeled for. That was pretty solid.
So you don't want to be here because it's time over distance. But you could be busted for doing 92 being on the outside.
Right. So you're going to want to, if you're a driver, you would want to hang in the middle and then just make sure they don't have speedometers in the car either, which is a big deal. So you'll see the lights in the middle of the dash there. There's
See if I slow down, they go down to yellows. If I speed up too much, reds. So you want to keep them all green.
So they're going to be looking at their rev counter for sure, and just making sure that they hit their marks. Wanting to make sure they. One of the big things that they do as teams is they've got engineers that know a bunch of math that they can figure that out. Where they know wherever you run on pit road, where on the rev limiter or where on the tachometer where you're supposed to be. So it's just going to be one of those things that is a big factor at this track. And speeding penalties on pit road will ruin your race if you're not careful, especially if you have multiple.
It is a drafting super speedway track, so it's not going to be a huge detriment. But if it's green flags, oh yeah, your race is pretty much done if you have too many of those.
Oh yeah. So that's going to be, like I said, if you watch the upcoming race at Atlanta, definitely be paying attention for pit road. That's going to be something that is a big sticking point. But then just in general, I mean, it's a fun track. Like we said before, as the surface ages, it gains more character. It runs a lot better. You're actually able to. I remember the first race, there was really only one lane that really worked. And then I want to say it was the next year they were actually able to run 2 lanes. So I'll be curious to see where the surface has aged and how it's transitioned over the last year and how these guys can run. and just your overall qualifying times are going to be a little bit interesting too. I know last year they were running pretty quick, but going to this year, like I said, it's all going to depend on track surface and stuff. But like last year, going back to their qualifying times, they were running the pole position was a 30.999 second lap, which again is they've got their tire pressures figured out, they've got the camber, they've got the whole crazy every little adjustment messed with. This is just a baseline setting for Tyler so on iRacing, so he hasn't messed with anything. I'm not smart enough to figure it out either. There's a bunch of different adjustments you can make within.
All I know is maybe a little bit of wedge and tire pressures. That's about it. I'm not keen on buying any setups anytime soon just to run hot laps. But
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things that come into it. So the lap times I'm doing, my best is a 31.476, and I'm running consistent probably 31.5 or 31.6 by myself. Now with pack, they're going to be probably a second faster, and like Isaac said before, they're going to have them tricked out, so they're going to be half a second faster. I'm not terrible, but I can hang with them.
Yeah. And like with that last lap, actually, we'll use your best lap to make you feel a little bit better about yourself. If we use that best lap time of a 31.476 for you, that would have, if you would have done that in a qualifying setting, that would have been tied for 23rd with Daniel Suarez for the 23rd fastest time for qualifying. So definitely not the slowest.
I would be speeding on pit road.
Well, you would have missed pit road completely because you would have had to have entered on way back in turn 3. But the old pit road, you still would have been speeding anyway.
Yes.
But yeah, it's going to be a fun race this weekend. I believe they've got all 3 series back this weekend. So the Truck Xfinity Cup Series are going to be there as well. So it'll be a good race, good weekend in general. If you do end up at the track, feel free to let us know. I would love to see if anybody else is, or if anybody plans on being at the track. You've got Saturday early in the afternoon. It's scheduled for 1:30 for the Truck Series, and then 5 o'clock in the evening for the Xfinity Series. And then on Sunday, the 23rd, at 3 o'clock for the Cup Series. So, again, if anybody's going or wants to go, or if you've ever been, we'd love to hear from you down below, just to hear if you've been or what you think of it. If you've got any predictions for the weekend, if you think your favorite driver is going to win for the weekend, we'd love to hear from you as well. I mean, just curious, just in general, we'd love to know who you're a fan of. If you've got a favorite driver in any series, whether it's the Cup Series, Truck, Xfinity, wherever, or if you've even got a favorite series. We're just curious.
Thanks so much for watching, guys, or listening, wherever your media is. Please check in next week. I do believe it is Circuit of the Americas. That's going to be a different layout. I do believe iRacing has it. If not, we'll just race the full thing.
Yep, so Tyler's going to run Circuit of the Americas next week. That'll be the 3rd race of the season after Atlanta. That'll be a fun one to dissect and break down, whether they have the new layout or not, like he said. But yeah, thank you guys for listening and watching. I'll be cheesy and say leave a like, comment, subscribe, follow. Do whatever you can if you want to follow this. And we'll be back next week.
See ya.
Enjoy the week.